G'day and welcome to the Aussie Ideas Man. I'm going to release a bee in my bonnet and do a third episode about EVs. If you haven't seen my others, then hit the links in my opening remarks. After doing the second one, I watched a few more EV related videos and made some comments myself. This didn't bother me until I watched the Aptera drive on Jay Leno's garage, linked with the others. I made some comments and ended up getting into some heavy discussions with some people on the merits of this crazy machine. The persistence of some to defend the indefensible prompted me to make this video. I had ready-made material in their silly comments, and a site I saw on how to become a YouTuber said to make at least 30 videos, no matter how bad they might be, because it helps in the end, so why not use it? And this time I have decided to reduce the overlays that take my ugly dial out of view, because the content is all that matters and fancy presentation is more insignificant than in my first 8 attempts. So my reasons why people should sit back and wait for Apteras to be in showrooms and have had expert reviews before going near them with your money are coming right in this video. You will get reasons why you shouldn't be a mug and risk getting stung. Be cautious, especially those of you who were burned over a decade ago. Let me qualify what you will hear right off the bat. This is nothing but my opinion, and I have no professional connection with any car companies, nor anyone associated with them. Nobody should act on my advice. Rather, weigh it in the balance with whatever other sources that are available and make decisions that you would fully own personally. It is not illegal to tell it how you see it, and it is not a mandate for anyone to act on what is observed by a third party, especially a bystander. Promoters of products should not expect to push their barrows and stifle candid opinions from their target audience either. That would not be a level playing field, and it would be trampling on the very definition of ethics. So, since the Aptera has come under my microscope, I will jump right in and tell you my top 5 reasons why I would run a mile from the company. Number 1. It failed once before. Sure, there have been companies that have failed and returned successfully, but there have also been ones that returned only to fail again, and we don't know which this will be. Any new company is a risk when compared to existing ones. There's a reason why they put slogans saying since 1874 and whatever year impresses under their names. It inspires confidence, which reduces risk aversion. Of the majority of companies that have failed and then resurrected, few have failed before selling a product, so Aptera is more likely not to resurrect. Most of the failures are not full closures, but merely receiverships, and they have traded out rather than closed. Again, this points to Aptera more likely to be terminal. While there is great risk in any shot at new life, Aptera is at the dangerous end of that risk. It may yet succeed, but in the meantime, any risk-averse person would take the safe option and wait until they can test drive one that is for sale after having read some expert road tests. The phoenix rising from the ashes is a myth after all. Number 2. The vehicle is extraneously expensive for what it is. Remember, it isn't even a car. It's an autocycle. And how many autocycles do you know of that cost between $26,000 and $47,000 US? The promoters claim it is cost comparable to EVs in general, but that is blowing smoke. It is a giant money pit, and I challenge anyone to provide hard data that shows it has a comparably priced EV with as few features and capabilities. I am a man of facts, and I eschew hollow promises. Take a look at the discussions I have had with EV devotees on Leno's garage and see if you can tell which of us is deluded. Or just make comments on here as to why you consider this little piece of junk is good value for money. I can hardly wait. One thing is certain, most failed companies fail because they lack value for money, and Aptera is front and centre a poor proposition on that front. Number 3. It really looks to me, for all intents and purposes, like a little piece of junk. I have lots of reasons, and reading my comments on Jay's garage will reveal most, but for those who don't switch channels, let me mention a couple. It's Spartan and a bit cocooned. The cabin is low budget. The wheel spats would blow away in a strong wind. You open it from an open window, so while you leave it in the sun to recharge, you can't leave it in the rain. It has no power steering, no horn, and you can see daylight between the rear window and the vehicle. The rear suspension is rubbish. The side windows are split, a feature that has failed on all the cars that have tried it. The 2 seats don't compete with any 2-seater I have seen, short of a Japanese K car. The boot, or trunk space, is impractical. But you say I'm talking about the alpha version, and the production version will fix most of those. Yes, I speak of what is, and disregard what might be. They want your money now, so you should want these matters taken care of yesterday. You should look at least at a prototype that is almost production ready. Speaking of 2-seat K cars, you get all the benefits of diminutive size, and there is not even that in the Aptera. It's ungainly. Number 4, it's an EV. But you say, being an EV is not a reason to shy away, and I say it is, because it carries all the bugbears EVs have, and few advantages. It's 2 trump cards, a range and acceleration, but the penalties more than offset those. However bad that is, we are really talking about risking your money on an EV auto cycle, and there are few successful companies in that category. This is about risk, and potential reward is just something to think about. At least know how real the potential reward will be if you pit it against risk. If you are gullible, you will swallow all the pros and never get the cons from those EV promoters. The risk is far greater than the promised rewards. Number 5, it has hollow promises by the founders, and they are rather dubious. Again, read my discussions on Jay's test drive video for covering most of them. You'll need to match my upload time with today's and the day before to locate them. And again, for those not wanting to switch, I will mention some here. I will write this right off the top of my head as I remember why I was thinking the promises contained too much risk. We have already gone over the alpha version being promised to have all those weaknesses fixed by the production version, but there was stuff left out. They took 2 years to build that version after having had one to use from a decade earlier and still had a half-baked prototype. Surprisingly, the promise made was that a beta version, then a gamma version, would ensue before the production version arrived, sometime in 2022. If they couldn't finish one properly by now, what chance have they got of 3 more in 14 months? They had 2 years' experience with an unfinished alpha, yet brazenly defied their own experience to promise versions averaging 4 months per version. That exhausts my memory. I'm too old to retain it all, so I'll run back over the video and pick up on a few. At 1 minute 30, the excuse for folding was the economy. No mention of the reasons given dozens of times over by Peter J. Jorgensen and N. Bruce Nelson, which includes those founders being kicked out of the company. The fact that there are conflicting accounts doesn't bode well for credibility. The fact PJ and NBN defend the bad comments also smells like a rat. You can count over 100 times I made excuses for flimsy wheel covers, and the number of times NBN states he will be driving his next summer is staggering. At 8:10 we get the claim that the mathematical premise of how to get from A to B was used, and it resulted in maximising aerodynamics being of primary importance. Something like that, but when you mathematically use the most efficient way, I am certain it would be a single seater with much less width. If you need 2 seats, I reckon mathematics applied would result in one behind the other, as in fighter planes and many small EVs these days. That would put the Aptera in 3rd place, mathematically. I haven't used maths, but I am pretty savvy when it comes to logic, and I also have a sensitive BS meter. Come to think of it, 50 people on a bus is probably more efficient. So why didn't they build an electric bus? Will we ever see the maths that made the Aptera side-by-side seating? They've had 15 years to provide it, but they would need to give it to a mathematician. Past 8 minutes and 40, he claims you don't get much energy out of the fuel burned, and in a motor get more out of its battery. This is a lie and very deceptive. While the energy is inefficiently collected in combustion, it is not less than the efficient collection a motor takes from a battery. The reason being is because batteries can only store 1/20th of the energy fuel has pound for pound. We can look at simple maths without having to be accurate with the machine draw efficiencies, because 20 times the power has too much leeway to fuss over it. Let's take his 60% loss for petrol engines and be generous for the motor losses. I will say 10% loss. So if a pound weight of petrol contains 2,000 joules, I have no idea what it really is, but it doesn't matter, then a pound weight of battery can hold no more than 100 joules, or whatever that is in kilowatts. Now we can apply the maths, and it is applicable to every EV and ICE car comparison with only minor variance. The inefficient engine will use 1200 joules as it wastes 800, and the EV is way behind it with its highly efficient 90 joules, yet wasting only 10. Pound per pound, the engine is over 13 times more powerful than the motor. That's why a 150 pound fuel tank needs a 2,000 pound battery pack to compete on range. That's way too heavy, so the EV makers compromise by reducing the pack to a heavy 650 pounds and reduce the range significantly, while still being 5 times heavier. At 10:26, they reveal the large rear window is normal glass, which defies mathematical calculations for best efficiency, since polycarbonate is half the weight and 2 times thickness. Since the thickness can be reduced, they could make it a thickness that is 10 times lighter and still 50 times stronger. They don't seem to apply their maths properly to be trusted. At 18 minutes and 26 seconds, he says they hope they can pull people from motorcycles, and it is doomed to fail there. If someone rides a bike for economy and short commutes to work, he can have that for under 4 grand. 21 grand more to a base model is too much of a stretch. And if someone wants a bike for performance, he can get exotic bikes for less that supply more excitement. I have ridden bikes for well over 40 years, and that silly frame could not compete with an MV Agusta F4 or a V4 Ducati. The Panigale starts at around 22 grand, so still cheaper than the base model. Go Japanese and get the Kawasaki H2 Carbon for about the price of the next model up. No way any bike rider is going to convert. It is so wacky it doesn't position itself as a viable alternative. At 19 minutes 15, he says the selling point is it being the most efficient thing to get you from point A to point B. Another deceptive lie. A pair of sneakers could trash it if the points were relatively close. Any 50 to 125cc bike would beat it just over walking distances. And for greater distances, a Greyhound bus would probably trump it. If I want to go to New York from here in Brisbane, I would think a modern jetliner would be the most efficient way. The Staten Island ferry is more efficient for getting to Staten Island once I'm there. If I was going to see the Northern Lights in Lapland, I think a snowmobile would be the most efficient at the last part of the trip. Granted, the Aptera is efficient in some circumstances, particularly when someone else owns it and gives you a lift, but it is not the most efficient way, all things considered. Different travels have their own most efficient ways. At 1945, the guff thickens. If you start with science, you end with Aptera, a marketing piece of nonsense, if ever I heard one. Car and bike makers have always used science, and over 100 years, no others have an Aptera equivalent. They are on their own with this oddball contraption. If it looked like a winner, the Chinese would have had the streets of Beijing and Shanghai riddled with them 10 years ago. They overlooked that first prototype and all the hot air that went with it. Yet the fact the first was not copied is a strong sign it is not following any scientific trajectory, nor as good as it makes out to be. At 2210, you don't get all that charging infrastructure. Well, I'm pretty sure you do. Pretty sure that's one more lie. 2440, the aerodynamics of the split windows sounds like guff. If it had no bar, it should be more aerodynamic. The problem was killing them? He's killing me. However, either way, the difference would be so minuscule, function should have overridden mileage loss, which you would probably measure in 4 or 5 house lots per 250 miles. I can't see that being 3% of overall efficiency. In summary, there wasn't much I could find that imbued credibility. He really looked too much of a snake oil salesman to me, and we make our value judgments on these sorts of perceptions. His body language didn't do him any favours either. Moving from the chat to the car, the drive was basically the same, showing no versatility at all. It really was basic A to B stuff, not one attempt at spirited driving, and I am left wondering if the cycle was no good at it. Jay's conclusion was that it was for someone who wants to be seen in something different. Well, I want to be seen in something different. A real car. And yeah, there's that. A real Aptera is nothing more than a promise. My self-preservation defences in my brain tell me to wait until it is real, then examine it with a fine-tooth comb before opening my wallet, if at all. Let me know what you think in the comments. If I have gone wrong somewhere, I would like to know where. Is this oddball machine all it's cracked up to be? Or is it something that doesn't really fit in anywhere? After all, it failed to be recognised as a car. That speaks for itself. Bye for now, and stay safe.